Hey, what's up guys? Guardian here, coming to you guys with a deck profile, and today we're going to be going over my Majesty Lord Blaster deck. So yeah, this deck came out last week, of course, in the special set that we got. MLB is a very fan favorite card of most Royal Paladin enthusiasts, and it was actually a card that I never really got a chance to use back in the day, because obviously, for those that know, I started Vanguard when Limit Break came out, with Garmor in the trial deck and Blondezel in set 6 back then. And yeah, MLB was just always a cool thing that I just remember seeing from the anime back then. And it's really cool to see him integrated within the standard format now. And wow, he got integrated pretty well. He's quite powerful. The deck overall does come with some flaws. It's not completely perfect, but I would be lying if I said this deck didn't feel like really smooth to play. The deck consistency is just really, really great. It's just a good feeling deck overall. So yeah, let's get stuck into this. Excited to show you guys what I came up with for the MLB deck. Now, I will say that most decks that you'll see from MLB are quite similar. A lot of the cards, obviously, that you get in the deck that came out, you are going to use most of them. So yeah, don't be surprised if there are similarities. But there are some interesting choices to make, especially in the grade 1s. So we'll get to that when we get there. But first, we have, of course, the main man himself for the grade 3. And the only grade 3 is Majesty Lord Blaster, MLB. Yeah, the card's nutty. The card's great. We'll put him right there. Yeah, you're going to be playing 4 of him. He gets the extra 5,000 power, the critical, and a drive check as long as Blaster Blade and Blaster Dark's in your soul. But he'll only get the power and the drive check element if he's on the Vanguard circle. So the cool thing with that is that he will get a crit still if you put him on the rear guard circle, which is actually one of the cool things about him, is that not only is it a really good Vanguard, but he's also going to give you some pressure for the rear guard columns as well. And with you stacking multiple force markers from his second effect, which is when he attacks while on Van, you put 2 rear guards into your soul, and then you get 2 imaginary gift force. Now, you can go with force 2, if the game calls for it. Like if your opponent's at like 3 damage, you might want to go for that force 2 and go for the extra lethal threatening plays. But force 1 is typically what you go for with this, just because you want to spit out as many power gains as possible through the force 1 and then just start smacking your opponent with really high numbers and pressuring their hand size. But yeah, the one element about that, though, is that you do have to give up 2 rear guards, so you are taking a -2 technically, but because you do get the extra drive check, you are making up for one of those minuses, so you are taking a -1 overall. So in order to combat that, you kind of want to play a lot of plussing elements in the deck to try refresh your hand size up and keeping it at a healthy amount, right? Because you don't want to be minusing too much. But of course, you do also want to get the power element that the gift skill does provide you. So next to MLB, we're going to jump straight into the grade 2s, but I kind of classify this card as like the backup grade 3, even though it's only a grade 2. But yeah, we're playing 3 copies of the Order when Light and Darkness intersects. So I basically just see this as like more copies of MLB kind of, but you do have to meet some conditions, of course. So basically, if you have Blaster Blade in your field, you can search Blaster Dark with this order, and vice versa. If you have Blaster Dark in the field, you can go get Blaster Blade. But if you have both of them on the field, you can go search Majesty Lord Blaster and add it to your hand, which is, of course, one of the cool things about this as well, is that not only does it give you access to the pieces that you need for MLB's skill to be fully fulfilled, but you are also able to go get MLB and start pressuring with his critical skill by just searching it with this. And of course, there are other interactions with the order being able to be recycled with things like your Trumpeter, but you are also able to search it through cards like Livarot, which we'll get to in a second. So that is going to be it for, well, it's already the end of the grade 3s of MLB, but I kind of, like I said, I kind of classify the order as like, you know, the backup grade 3 if we did have one, but it's technically in the grade 2 lineup. So, of course, continuing on with the grade 2s, we are playing the 4 copies of Blaster Blade, which is, he has returned. It's been a while, I think, since he's been on the channel. I can't remember the last time I did a deck profile with Blaster Blade, actually. I think I did include him in the Otmile deck, possibly. I can't remember. But yeah, I think the last fully developed Blaster Blade deck that I actually showcased was like the Ganstot Soul Saver deck. But yeah, Blaster Blade, of course, being a very important piece for the deck, along with the counterpart Blaster Dark. Now, of course, you do have to play the new one for an MLB deck that states that it is a Royal Paladin. So they decided to go with that sort of a way instead of going for the awkward ruling that we had back in the past where, Blaster Dark in the past could be running a Royal Paladin deck at up to 4 copies. But that was it. So strange, but they've kind of gone with this sort of direction with the skill orientation as well. So that's the thing there. But yeah, both of these are key pieces of the deck that you need, obviously, but they do provide you the retiring ability, which, of course, the cool thing is that, like I state all the time with Royal Paladin, but retiring isn't really an aspect that the clan is known for doing, but because we have the utility of front row retires with Blaster Blade, and then, any retire that the opponent chooses with Blaster Dark, the opponent has to kind of play around that a little bit, because, of course, they know that we can get rid of the front rows with Blaster Blade, but they have the choice with Blaster Dark. So it kind of comes down to, playing around those types of players and just bearing in mind what you have to come up against. Especially the Blaster Dark, because since he has that Twin Drive skill, you might want to place your rear guards down, like, at a certain amount. Even if they place 2 rear guards, you can just snipe one. You can just snipe the front row and then get rid of the back row if that's what they decide to do. So you kind of have to think ahead in that aspect. But yeah, the Twin Drive is really good, really potent in the early game. This helps you get through your deck, filter through it a bit faster to see your pieces. And yeah, it's really, really solid. It's kind of weird, actually, for me to be playing Blaster Dark in general. I think I did play him in my premium deck, of course. But yeah, the fact that we can integrate him now in Royal Paladin is it's definitely interesting, to say the very least. So next, we have the 3 copies of Star Called Trumpeter. Very, very good card. I've noticed a lot in Japan when it comes to Trumpeter. A lot of decks like to play 4 of this, which I kind of understand why, is because it's such a potent. It's just got such good potency when it comes to card advantage. It gives you back the Order and a Blaster from your drop zone, which is really cool because you can bring back the MLB, since your opponent might be going for that quite often, since it is quite threatening on the rear guard circle. So it gives you a chance to recycle him. But also, recycling the Order is just insane because it's just more deck thinning, more search, more card selection with what blaster you want to go get, which can then give you more follow-up retires, which is really good. But one element about Trumpeter, which is also really, really solid, is the fact that it gets boost whilst you have a Blaster Vanguard, which is actually insane because, again, just an extra 10k on top of your columns, which are already hitting for good numbers. That's just an extra magic number that you're meeting there, and it's just really, really good. So, yeah, definitely want to play at least 3 of them, I think. I do understand why some lists go for 4, but in my honest opinion, I just don't like 4. I think it's just a bit too clunky, because Trumpeter doesn't really come up that often in the early game. In certain scenarios it can, but it's mainly a late game card, if anything. But next to Trumpeter, we have the last grade 2, being our 3 copies of Livarot. So Livarot, of course, was a very fondly looking forward to for MLB, for the deck itself. But yeah, it's solid because it gives you a grade 2. It can go get you the Dark or the Blade, depending on which one you need. But the utility factor that I love about it is the fact that it can go get the Order. And the way that kind of interacts with the game is that if you get the Order and call it to the rear guard circle, because of game mechanics, the Order will actually get retired and it will be put into the drop zone because obviously it can't stay on a rear guard circle. That's not how they work. But it gives you the searchability factor, which is awesome because that means Trumpeter can then start recycling it consistently. Since you only played the 3 Order, but because you have the Livarot, you kind of have 6 in that respect. So that's kind of cool. And because Livarot's also got the consistency element with being able to counterblast or soul blast for his skill, you pretty much have access to him more times than often to get whatever you need at the time, which is really, really solid. So that's going to wrap up the grade 2s. So the grade 1s, this is where it's very different, put it that way. A lot of people run a lot of different things, but it's safe to say that one of the key grade 1s that is really, really strong is Wingal Brave. This thing is insane. Like, I'll admit, this card is bonkers good. Like, Wingal Youth, back from the old G Legend deck for Aichi, would be put to shame if it saw this card. So it kind of does the same thing in that regard, is Wingal Brave says, whilst on Vanoria, when its attack or the attack that it boosts hits an opponent's Vanguard, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, Reveal up to one card with Blaster in the card name from among them and add it to your hand, then shuffle the deck. It's just mad the fact that it stays on the field as well. So not only does it give you the pluses, but it's giving you just constant on hit pressure over and over again. And if you see these in the early game, you are looking good. And this card just adds tons of consistency when the hit actually does go off, which more times than often it does, depending on the scenario. But yeah, this card's just insanely good. Great to have in the early game. Slap it down, start pressuring, and then you will get some hits off. Trust me. The opponent's not going to go completely, and just guard everything, essentially, with this. You will get some of its skills off, but the opponent is going to be wary of it. But you've got so many other things in the deck that can search and just increase your consistency that it's kind of a bit pointless, but it really depends. But you definitely want to be playing 4 of these regardless. And then next, for another 4 of, we are playing 4 copies of Night Squire Elaine. Yes, and it's kind of weird. We haven't jumped back into 2018. We haven't, but Elaine is still usable, and it's good because it's an on-place effect to give you that draw of obviously call something that's equal or less than your Vanguard's grade, but it gives you pluses, which you do want to do, like I said earlier, to mitigate the minuses that MLB gives you for the force markers. But because it's an on-place, you don't really care for it afterwards, which is actually one of the main things in comparison to this and Mirren, is that yes, Mirren is good, but Elaine just has that flexibility factor, because you can put Elaine wherever you want to, where in comparison, Mirren has to go in the back row rearguard circles in those 2 columns. So yeah, Elaine's just a bit better in terms of feel, but you can play Mirren if you want to, but I think Elaine's just that little bit better just for that flexibility factor. The fact that you can place it wherever you need to, and then the other unit that you're calling can go wherever you need that to go to as well. They don't have to be in the same column, which is pretty important because sometimes you do need to place things in certain places when it comes to actually putting those rearguards into your soul for the MLB. So that is something to take note of there. The next, I am going to be playing 2 copies of Felax. So Felax, sorry. I love this card. I was actually debating between this and another grade 1 that was from set 5, I believe, where whenever it attacks or boosts an attack, you can Soul Blast 1 to give it 10k. I can't really remember what it's called, but I believe it is from set 5. But Felax is basically the same thing, except that instead of 10k power, it's 5k power, but you have the extra utility factor of bouncing units back to your hand. And that can be so good for so many different scenarios. Like, one of the main things I like about it is that if you're playing against a matchup that is going to be threatening your MLBs on the rearguard circle, like, say Narukami, for example, if they try to bind them, that kind of sucks because you can't recycle a bound MLB with something like Trumpeter, for example. But what you can do is that you can bounce it back to the hand for safekeeping, and then use it for your next turn, So they're not dwindling your resources too heavily. But other aspects of Felax that I love is that it gives you more opportunity to use your on-play skills, which obviously we have a lot of those in the deck. So that's another element that I like about him as well. The power aspect of him is great as well, getting more numbers. And also the early game aspect of him is solid, because if you can call down say a Wingal Brave on the rear, swing with that, and then, have that chance to hit, and then attack with the Felax, bounce the Wingal back to your hand, not only do you keep that Wingal Brave safe, but you're also making it so that the opponent has to attack your Vanguard now to give you some sort of resource with your counterblasts, and then you can follow up by riding into your Blaster Dark, and then calling the Wingal behind the Vanguard, and then still having the on-hit pressure available. So not only did you get an extra attack, that extra attack pressure in the grade 1 stage of the game, but you've now got the solid boost pressure of Wingal still available in the grade 2 stage of the game. So I think the flexibility of Felax is just phenomenal, and I think it's great, and yeah, I really am a big fan of this card. And to wrap up the grade 1s, we are playing the Blaster grade 1s, and we're going with Javelin. And the reason I go with Javelin is that it's kind of acting like a Trumpeter in that respect. The fact that it's a 10k booster, but just having that extra flexibility in terms of getting the power boost, and also having the choice to bounce this back to your hand with your Trumpeter skill and recycling it is solid. It's also not too bad for a ride target, since it's a blaster you could Soul Blast out and then recycle, so that's also a thing there. But I kind of just like it for the power element, you know, being a 10k booster and giving you better numbers. Because trust me, when you get the extra 10k in the early stages, it actually does ramp up quite a bit. So that's going to be it for the grade 1s. I was quite happy with this selection. I thought a lot about it when it came to actually picking my cards. The grade 1 side of this deck is probably the most toughest thing about it. Like, trust me. The grade 2 and the grade 3s, easy as pie. You could do a bit of flexing over here in terms of, like, you know, how many of Trumpeter and Livarot you want to play. But the grade 1s is the toughest part, and it really just comes down to you and your personal choice. So, yeah, that's my choice there. So to wrap the deck up, we of course have our grade 0s, and, you know, unlike the grade 1 aspect, we did keep the grade 0s pretty simple. We of course have our Barcgal here, and we are playing a very simple lineup of 8 critical with our Epona, our Flogal, the PG, the draw PG, and our heal triggers. And the cool thing about all this is that we are playing the foils as well, which has been quite a lot. It's been quite a long time since I've actually played these foil triggers, since I was using them for my premium deck for a long time. But, you know, with MLB being quite, you know, a shiny deck, let's say the least, well, you have the opportunity to make a shiny deck. I think it's just great the fact that there's just loads of foils in here. It just looks really pretty to use and really nice. And yeah, I did experiment with the triggers a little bit. I was thinking about playing like 7 crit, 5 draw, but that was beforehand when I was going with like the 4 Allen and the 2 Marin. But then I swapped those Marins out to put the Blaster Javelins in, and because I've got that because I've got the recyclability through the Javelin there, I just decided to keep the trigger lineup pretty simple and straightforward. Because you got to bear in mind, because of MLB's passive skill with the extra 5k, each of these are now like an extra 5k shield, kind of like outside of like if MLB was just a normal 13k Vanguard. But just imagine that 5k basically being like an extra 5 on all of these shields, which is pretty insane. And that's kind of one of the other elements that I wanted to keep with my grade 1 lineup, was that I wanted at least 12, because I did feel like a lot of decks were playing like 10, like as an average ratio. I felt like 12 is a little bit better for that extra defense, because I think a lot of decks were replacing them for like additional grade 2s, which again I understand, but at the same time it's like I kind of do want that defense there just in case. But the flexibility these things provide as well, like the Felax, for example, it's just really great to have in the deck. So yeah, that's going to be it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's actually quite fun, honestly. I was surprised about this because the deck itself is, like I said, simple, but it's just fun to play because of the consistency that it has. The flow of the deck just feels great. And, you know, who doesn't like swinging with a triple drive, 2 crit Vanguard with, you know, huge power gains from those force markers? Feels good. It feels good. But yeah, this is such a good support wave for Royal Paladin. Everything else beforehand has sort of been like okay at best, like fairly good. But this has actually put Royal Paladin a bit further on the map in terms of relevancy when it comes to the competitive scene. But yeah, that's going to do it for me, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I am planning to do a few more deck profiles later this month. I'm actually going to do some premium stuff because I actually want to revisit my premium decks since it's been a long time since I've profiled them. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for me. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. This is Guardian, signing out.